Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. I'm really happy to be here today with my distinguished panel. It makes my job feel very lame. Let's kick it off. We have Muna AbuSulayman. She's a philanthropist, a talk show host, and development expert. We also have Lujain AlUbaid, co-founder and CEO of Tesami for Social Entrepreneurship. She's also an Acumen Fellow. Then we have Laura Londén. She's Deputy Executive Director and Assistant Secretary General of United Nations Population Fund, fighting for sexual reproductive health and rights. And last up on the other side, we got Brandee McHale, President of City Foundation and Director of Corporate Citizenship over at City. Ladies, thank you very much for joining today. So let me tell you a stat that actually came from Lara, and I want to get your take on if you guys thought about this or if it's surprising to you. So 40% of the 1.4 billion living in states impacted by crises are under the age of 15. Show of hands, is that surprising? That's it. Wow, okay. I was surprising to me, actually, but there were like only 3 of us, so now I feel super uneducated. So, Lara, for the 3 of us in the audience who was surprised by that, can you walk us through what that means, what that looks like, why that is?
Well, why that is obviously is I guess fairly clear that the population demographics of today are just such that we have the largest group of young people ever in our history. And a large portion of those, actually the majority of those, live in less developed countries. And again, when you look at that, you have a number of girls and young people who are, again, a very substantive part.
Lujain, not to pick on you, sorry, but you're the youngest sitting on the stage. So I wanted to get just your experience on what was it like to grow up in Saudi Arabia, what helped you, what didn't, to give some human perspective to what Lara just said.
I think the Saudi youth is very ambitious in making a lot of change and progress in Saudi. And what inspired me to start the organization, Tesami, was actually a 5-minute meeting with my co-founder, Amira Touil. And we were just discussing how we can enable youth to prosper and make positive change. And from there, we took it in 5 minutes to what we have today, a nonprofit that empowers social entrepreneurs. We get around 50 to 70 emails every week from youth around Saudi Arabia in small towns and big cities, suggesting ideas and suggesting solutions for social problems we face on a daily basis.
Was it hard to get that engagement?
It wasn't hard, but it's overwhelming. I go to bed every night, much heavier than the day before, because I feel that these youth reaching out to us in Tesami is a responsibility and it's not a privilege. And with the resources we have in our organization, we're always thinking how we can maximize the impact in a very bigger scale on a national level.
And Muna, you've been doing this for a few decades, and I'd love to get your take. You spoke to me earlier about the change in social media and how that's changed how you need to deal with development and reaching out to young people.
So let me just frame this in a little bit. So 1.8 billion people are kids, young people, 10 to 24 years old. By the end of the century, we're either going to be 7 billion remain, or we're going to be 17 billion people. And the majority of that increase is going to be young people, youth. And so you have a huge, most people say the average is going to be 11 billion by the end of the century. But you have this huge influx of people, and as Laura said, most of them are in the 48 least developed countries in the world. The places where there's conflict, there's scarcity of water, there's scarcity of jobs, scarcity of unemployment, and you're looking at actually a huge, we're already in a crisis mode, but even a bigger crisis that is happening that is going to be increased by the access to social media, because people are able to vent more, they're able to congregate and decide to create, what is important to them, what's not important to them, without anybody else interfering. And so you have this kind of framework that we have to look at, and you're saying we need to look at how can we go into a more peaceful and tolerant society And yes, there's a lot of improvement in poverty in certain areas, there's a lot of improvement in technology, but with all these changes, will that remain so? And one of the issues that we deal with in the past 20 years is that there's now been an acceptance of the need of adding more young people into decision-making, whether it's private companies or governments. And you're seeing that, for example, in Dubai, we have the Minister of Youth now, who is somebody who's very interested. I mean, the first Minister of Youth, as a youth, she's, I think, 22, 23 years old.
Wow.
Exactly.
I also didn't know that.
A decision maker who actually is looking at the world through eyes of the you're called metropolitan now? Is this the new name for you guys?
I don't know, is it yes? There's a clap over there.
The metropolitan generation, the millennial generation, we have to see an increase in that kind of leadership where more and more young people are coming up. The only place where you find a lot of young people with the average person who's working there or who is the leader of the company is in technology, which also happens to be where the world is heading. And so social media, technology are enabling and opening up the doors to the young people to become their own decision makers, to have the choices of how they want to lead their lives, the kind of employment they want, the kind of world they want to be in. And it can go negative or it can go positive. And that depends a lot on the kind of efforts that are happening around this panel.
Right, basically it's up to you guys to help that decision. So Brandee, that brings me to you as to take a look on a big corporate level. What are the initiatives that you guys take to reach those young people and steer them towards the good?
So I think we're at a really interesting point in the private sector where we've typically thought about investing in the next generation, either as a way to just give back, it's part of a corporate social responsibility activity, or we've thought about it in terms of our own workforce. How do we develop our own talent pipelines? But I actually think that there's a recognition right now that we're in a time where there's so much change from a social and economic standpoint that actually if we don't help to invest in young people and their economic opportunities, this is a real economic risk for us in the private sector. These are not just our future workers, but also our future markets. So we're working really across the board. We have a large philanthropic initiative which is designed to work both helping young people to build skills and experience and networks and the connections that they'll need to succeed. But the other piece of it is we want to increase understanding about what's happening. Yes, there's a lot of information out there, but we're in a very dynamic state. And I'll just add one interesting thing that we discovered. We've done 2 surveys now over the past 3 years, each of 5,000 young people, to go to them directly to understand what's happening. They are overwhelmingly optimistic. But what we're finding is that it's young people in developing countries that are more optimistic than developed countries because they see things happening around them. But on the flip side, we recognize that if we don't quickly translate and harness that optimism into a real path to opportunity, that's when we begin to have the social breakdown.
And Lara, this really brings to light what you do as sexual reproductive rights sort of become such a barrier to even having those opportunities that Brandee's talking about.
Absolutely, and as I was listening to my co-panelists, it struck me that this is actually what future should look like. That we have young people who have the ability, the rights, the skill and the knowledge and the opportunities to reach their full potential. But that is actually where I think the main problem at the moment is, that while a large part of the world's young people have those abilities and capacities and access to information, that is not so for many others. And this is where I feel in particular under the Sustainable Development Goals, where we have reaffirmed that sustainable development cannot be achieved without fundamental human rights for all. And that in particular includes young people and young girls and young women. There is a huge opportunity for the world globally and for our shared future to make sure that the young people can contribute and contribute in a meaningful way. And the other thing I hear some of my children of my colleagues say to me, don't see us first as young people and then young leaders, but see us first as leaders who happen to be young. And I think that's an important distinction to be made, so that their voices are not deemed to be young voices, but they are on par with the voices of everyone else. Because let's face it, they are the future of our world that we share. So it's truly very important. And I think what is really also very critical is that it is recently, I think, becoming increasingly obvious to many countries that the so-called youth bulge, which is the huge number of young people that we have, isn't a risk. And it isn't necessarily a challenge that to be tackled. It is an opportunity. And that opportunity can be harnessed if, again, the young people are educated, they're empowered, and they're able to determine their own lives as to, if they want to get married, when they want to get married, how many children they want to have, or do they simply also wish to contribute to the economy of the country. And if all these conditions are in place, countries can harness what is called the demographic dividend, where the balance between working age people and non-working age people is optimal so that the country can thrive.
I'm interested in what you said, because it sounds like you don't look at young people in a crisis situation as being victims.
Absolutely, no, and that's, there's actually two elements to it. Young people at large, they have already shown that they are a powerful force in peace building and peacekeeping, as well as recovery of societies, as are women, who often have a major role in recovery of societies. And to that effect, actually, UNFPA, together with other UN partners, we have a number of instruments through which we want to increase the engagement of young people in any areas of peacekeeping and peace building.
So, Lujain, talk about that conversation, how that ties in to the foundation that you started.
So I guess I would like to highlight 2 points.
Sure.
The importance of having the right mentorship. It is extremely crucial to have the right mentors that are around you. For me personally, I have been blessed to have great mentors, starting from my co-founder. For example, when she invested so much time in telling me not to invest so much time in planning and just go with experimenting and going with the results of these experiences, and going to my experience in Acumen with Jacqueline Novogratz, the founder of Acumen, that made me realize that the most crucial part for youth in general in the region of Middle East is actually mentorship. It is challenging to understand how we can tackle that, how we can solve it. And I think we still have a lot of work in the region to understand how we can provide better mentors. The other piece is actually having role models. Most of our role models in the Middle Eastern region are mainly westernized. And I think that we need to develop tools and resources in order to educate youth about role models around them. Having a role model in your community who made it is much more relevant than having a role model who's in the US. It plays a huge part in inspiring the youth to be better.
And Brandee, you have a unique position because you're basically trying to be some of those mentors, right? Can you walk us through the kind of programs that you have and how you might adapt to what Lujain was saying?
Mm-hmm. We fund a lot of different NGO programs. There's so many good organizations that are out there. And each one has a different tactic and a different way of helping young people to develop their leadership skills, develop their technical skills, which are all important things. But one of the things I think we just have to also keep in mind is that fundamentally, we have to continue to help young people to actually believe that there's a better future for them. And I think that access to technology has made the world smaller, but it's also made it really more complicated and noisy. And I think it's important that we continue to find ways to get out those stories of inspiration, because role models aren't just, in this day and age, the people you are literally sitting face to face with, but they can be role models anywhere. And storytelling, I think, is such an incredibly important piece. We've made a commitment that over the next 3 years, we will connect 10,000 of our employees to young people around the world to both do traditional mentoring, to do coaching, provide guidance, some of it in person, some of it virtual. I want to say one thing, though, that I think is different. None of these ideas have been around for a while. It's not a revolution. But I do think that those of us that are practitioners and working in this space, there is one thing that we can learn from the private sector, and I think it's critically important for mentors to be able to share this, and that is the idea of fail fast. We are not good in the social development space, are comfortable with the concept that one of our ideas could actually fail. We design these long programs, we evaluate them over many years. It's actually not the way that innovation occurs anymore. And so I think we need to both mentor young people directly to have that entrepreneurial mindset and feel comfortable with that fail-fast mentality, but I also think we need some mentoring in the practitioner and policymaker space as well.
Moon, I want to get your take on these two things, because I feel like you have perspective of both.
So it's very interesting. I think, yes, a lot of us need retraining. But there's a saying that says, you can't be what you can't see. So role modeling is extremely important. This is something we've done on my show for over 15 years, looking at people from different socioeconomic levels, different countries, different cultural backgrounds, and looking at how you can speak to large segments of society, whether male or female, so that they can see themselves in some kind of success story, whatever that means to them. It could be the mother who's raising her kids, with loss of life because of a crisis situation, losing her husband in conflict zones, or somebody who's, wants to change her major from something to other and doesn't have the guts to talk to her parents about it, who wants her to be a doctor. So it could be whatever speaks to you. So role modeling, extremely important, and we do that all the time.
Muna, one sec. Do you feel like role modeling is more important for girls or boys, women or men? Like, is there a distinction in how you have to look at the mentoring in that?
So I think it's both. So I'll talk about it from a social point of view. The idea of what family is, what roles of males and females all over the world has been changing so fast that these kind of role models are needed for both. Perhaps for women, we think about it in terms of success outside of the family, reaching your potential, that kind of mentorship. The role modeling is extremely important to show that whatever your situation is, you can choose the type of life that you want to lead, and there's somebody who went through this exact same experience and was able to do it, and these are the tools, this is the programs. For men, actually it's the other way around. It's loss of the idea of what does it mean to be the male provider, especially in the Arab world. Also, this idea of having a job for life has changed, and so being a provider outside has also changed, and he needs to figure out how that does not affect his own masculinity, because that creates violence a lot of times as he's going through that transition of losing his job, joining the gig economy, and not being able to, for example, give a sustainable quality of life for his family. So these things really matter for men, and we try to showcase it. And not a lot of programs do that, but we do. I want to go back to this idea of building blocks. We can't paint the whole world with the same brush, right? What's happening in the US, it might be the same issues, but the severity of them, the context of it is quite different. And so, for example, in the Arab world, we always talk about skills and we talk about employment, which is really important, but we actually have a bigger issue, which is knowledge. So access to knowledge has been severely curtailed through different things, whether it is actually kids not finishing high school, not finishing education, not joining secondary education, but also what is the quality that they're getting. And we talk about training teachers a lot so that they can accommodate this kind of youthful surge. I love the word youthful surge that Madeleine Albright said, the youthful experience. But one of the things we had missed was this idea of academic knowledge. So most journals, and a lot of the people here have studied abroad, so they speak English very well. 95% of the Arab world does not speak English well enough to be able to access an academic journal quality of understanding. And so that has not been able to contribute to building our societies. this knowledge that already exists that the rest of the world is using. Right now, we're experimenting with how to create these kind of databases to be translated into Arabic with the Ethica Foundation, with Dubai Foundation, and inshallah also MiSK Foundation. MiSK has looked at also the visual arts and the idea of knowledge, building knowledge in technology. So people who study computer science and these types of things from not practice, so you don't work in it, you actually create it. And this is a very important building block that has been missing for a very long time, and no funding has been going into for almost, I don't know, 100 years of the 20th century. These are the things that we have to think about. We can't build a home without the foundation, and we've been trying to do that for a very long time.
And Lara, I feel like that really ties into you as well. I mean, access to knowledge, you have to have control of your reproductive organs to even have the right to go have that knowledge, right?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed what you said. I think what we all also have to remember is that it's only 2 years ago since 193 countries signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now it's 2017, the clock's ticking. If we do not take care of the fundamental human rights, including equality, poverty, and women's rights, we will not be able to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think time is precious here, and we need to actually move on to delivering for young people across the globe, whatever they need, wherever they are. I completely agree, it's not one size fits all, and that's why I think organizations like the UN work very contextually with the governments that they work with in order to make sure that the population's needs are met for whatever they are. But the information is really important. Again, for societal reasons, there's an intergenerational cycle of poverty and disempowerment if you lack education and you lack your rights. If you are poor and uneducated, the likelihood that your children and their children will be poor and uneducated increases. And that has, we have to understand, incredible impact on the entire society and the global world that we live in.
I'd like to take it from here to another point. Also, it is very crucial to understand that organizations and governments can't do everything. We need to invest in the right people. We need to invest in our community champions, identify them. And to Sami, we believe that the most crucial investment we can do, or the best investment we can do, is the investment in people. In people who can make change, who can thrive, who can push others to change even more. We built our programs focusing on 3 elements: leadership, soft skills, and technical skills. And we are focusing more on leadership more than the skills, because you can learn it anywhere. But to enable a person to push them and make them do and achieve a lot through what they do in their work by providing solutions for ideas, I think it's much more crucial than depending on governments. I think one of the biggest mistakes we do as our generation is that we expect everything from everyone. Expectations should be managed. And I think we need to shift our mentality in understanding how we can change, how we can do things. The idea of me shifting from finance to social activity and social work came out of my frustration. I remember standing in front of ministers asking them to bridge a gap between youth in Saudi and the government and decision makers. And I believe that leadership is not only telling people what they do. Leadership is taking people from where they are to where they need to be, not where they want to be, because sometimes they would want something which is completely different than what they actually need.
Muna?
Well, it's very interesting because the way that you view the government is also changing, right? What is the role of the government? And for me, the government has 2 roles right now. First of all, it has to protect the most vulnerable, right? It has to be able to help those who can't help themselves for whatever reason, whether it is because of the family you were born in or some kind of circumstance that happened to your life that makes you unable to take care of yourselves. And I think governments are not doing a good job of that, unfortunately. And then you go into the changing society. So now we're going to have artificial intelligence, right? Doing a lot of stuff from, I was just telling my co-panelists that I was reading about when will artificial intelligence do certain things. And the one thing that struck me was, I think in 2040, or maybe 2030, or maybe 2040. Anyways.
It's not that far away, either way.
It's not that far away.
Leave it at that.
The robot or your computer or the algorithm or the AI, whatever it is, something is going to be able to write your high school essay. So you don't have to plagiarize anymore. You just have to tell your robot to write your essay. And so that is actually quite concerning, because if robots are able to create content that is indistinguishable from human content, that means the only difference that we have that is an edge is creativity. And creativity becomes in, well, what is the worth? How can you, كيف تاكلوا? How do you eat with creativity, right? And so this is where the government comes in. And so we're saying we lessen the role of the government, or the government is not doing a good job. And then suddenly we're looking at where the government has to create laws that enable AI to pay for our lifestyles. This is the idea of basic universal income, if some people have heard about it, where every single person would be paid a certain amount of money so that they don't need to have a job. They can do whatever they want to do. You can be as creative as you want to be. And so you have this kind of movement going in, and then suddenly you also go into the 48 least developed countries. And so you might have 2 different worlds within 15 years.
But Brandee, that also highlights the need for what you do from a corporate sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the reasons why we are so enthusiastic and committed to the vision of the Sustainable Development Goals is because I just think fundamentally there's a recognition that we can't work in silos, and we're bringing together the public and the private sector and the NGO sector in very new ways to spark innovation and collaboration and coordination. But I think there are 2 things when we think about young people and their economic futures that we really need from the private sector today in order to be ready for tomorrow. The first is, I think that organizations at all levels need to begin to rethink the traditional way that we think about talent pipelines from let's go after the most highly credentialed people to let's go after the highest potential people. And often, I will tell you, I think people who come from conflict backgrounds, who have lived through adversity and have a level of resilience, those are the people that I want on my team, and the people who I think are going to be able to most adapt to a quickly changing world. And then I think the other thing that we are all we're aware of it, but I don't think any of us fully understands it, is going to be the impact of automation on the future of work. What are the jobs that we need to prepare young people for? Because a lot of those jobs are not going to be here. And so I think we need to really work with the private sector to understand the dimensioning and the modeling for the future.
But also work with the government so that we create the laws that protect people.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because as I said, the 2 worlds, there's people that are just heading into technology, and I think there's a lot of experimentation with basic universal income in the Norwegian countries. And then there are countries who are like, they're still using manual labor.
Right.
And so
we have about a minute and 20 seconds left. So I'd like to wrap it up by, if you could each talk for about like 20 or 30 seconds about, in 5 years, what's the single biggest thing that you can do and affect change towards your goal? Who wants to start?
Oh, they're going to be pointing to me.
It's like, wait,
5
now
years.
you're
Okay, so I think that the thing that we can do in 5 years is make a much stronger economic case for why getting this right is actually in the best interest of our shareholders. I think we are on the verge of a very different time in the world of business where investors need to begin to demand that companies take these issues into account, and that they're thinking not just about the short term today, but really focusing more on the long term.
Lada.
Yes. As a matter of fact, our strategic plan has a vision that reaches to 2030. And the first years of that will be 0 maternal mortality 0 unmet need for contraception and family planning, and 0 harmful practices. That's where we're heading by 2030.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, let's give it a clap. I'm sorry, we're going 1 minute over, everybody. Don't freak out. Okay.
So, again, we believe in investing in people, and we hope that Tesami will be able to create so many platforms that would enable those ambitious youth that want to change and create solutions.
Muna?
So I think for me, both whether it's in philanthropy or in media, I think the most important thing in the 5 years is actually enabling youth to come together so that they create the solutions for the problems that they think need to be solved, giving them ownership of their own future.
Thank you so much, Brandee, Laura, Muna, and Lujain. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all.